See, especially from a forensic perspective, a professional, and this is another thing your listeners need to understand is this. A normal adult, when they encounter somebody that has spent time with the likes of Hannibal Lecters and rapists and people that have done heinous things, I have spent time with. I've accrued more clinical contact hours in solitary confinement than any single psychology staff member in the US or Canada. I hold the record. Okay, I can tell you definitive things. Now, most people will say, "You what? Yeah, you know about like really heinous things, and you can tell us what goes on in their mind." Yeah, like you've spent a lot of time with them, and you can warn us about. Yeah, what do most people do? They'll say, "Oh, so you can help me better protect my kids?" Yeah, well, tell me. Okay, that's a normal adult. At first, they may say, "Well, I don't want to know," but wow, you're like the Jane Goodall of research. And, other psych staff could do what I did, but they don't want to. They just won't spend the time. It takes a lot of time. Okay. So a normal adult, what I say is this, they'll lean into someone that has insights because they want to understand how to protect kids. They'll say this to the professional. Wow, you've interviewed guys that have hacked up body parts and stuff, so you know their minds. Tell me more. So they'll they'll want to draw the information out. A predator will say this, "You're what? Shut your mouth. I don't want to hear from you. I know you've only spent 15 years. You hold the record for hours accrued. You're certified in the Hare Psychopathy Checklist. You ran one of the state's 65-bed units standalone for sexually violent predators. You created the first treatment program in long-term. What do you know, you faggot, you bigot, you whatever, you homophobe? Get away from me. We don't want to hear you. Shut your mouth. We ought to ban you from social media." Whoa.
Mm-hmm.
A normal adult wants to know more from those who know so they can better protect kids. Somebody who wants access to kids for nefarious reasons will tell somebody like me to shut my mouth. That's all you need to know for starters right there. Who wants to know more from a professional who knows versus who wants to silence me? Why would they want to do that?
Well, the other thing too is,
and by the way, that word, I've been called all sorts of things. So yes, I've been called the F word.
Now, why is it that whenever, for example, I go on to the internet and I see these drag performers and they are, in some cases almost completely nude performing in front of children, and I say, "Hey, there's something wrong here. Whoa, what is going on here?" And I'm told, number one, to deny what I'm seeing. What I'm seeing actually isn't seeing. I'm being told, well, this never happens. So then I post videos where it's happening and they say, that isn't actually what's happening. So I'm being told to deny my eyes, which is cult-like behavior. This idea of, you can't actually admit what's going on.
What you are about to see is a full-on erotic drag queen show, complete with gyrations, tongue gymnastics, and a flashed G-string at a kids' public school talent show. Check this out.
then if I present, which I have all the receipts, I mean, I save all the videos and that, so when people tell me it isn't happening, I can show them it's happening. Then they say, well, it might be happening on the very rare occasion, but it's very, very rare. Okay. So I say, well, those rare occasions, what are we doing about it? And how are we going to protect children from those rare occasions? Then the other thing I'm told is, and this has become very, very common. I purposely added Reverend to my Twitter handle, and that because it absolutely triggers the cognitive dissonance in an amazing subgroup of people. I've been amazed at how often people will put their biases onto me just by seeing that handle, and they'll tell me, well, it's way worse in the church. And what are you doing about the church? Why don't you care about what's going on in the church? And then I tell them, well, I care about what's going on in the church, and I don't think that should happen. I think all predators should be locked up for life. And, if they're really, really heinous predators, my personal opinion is I think they should be executed for the safety of society. And that's my personal opinion. And then they're left with this thing of, well, what's happening there isn't as bad as what's happening in the church. So how do we reconcile that with this cognitive dissonance where I bring up and I show them the videos and they turn around and they just send me a whole bunch of things of ministers and pastors and tell me the church is way worse. The church is way worse. Or they tell me, toddlers and tiaras, you don't have an issue with that though. And I said, well, I do actually have an issue with that. I think it's absolutely disgusting as well. I think it's awful, disgusting. And I think it should be taken off the internet as well. I think it should be taken off of all cable TV. And I think the people involved in that should be investigated as well.
Correct.
So why is it that whenever you bring this up as a thing, they say, well, it's not happening, or if it is happening, it's not that bad. And then if they have to admit that it's bad, well, it's not as bad as this.
Because they're deflecting. It's simple as that. Again, a perpetrator, a manipulator, perpetrator, cult leader, sociopath, psychopath, all on a continuum, quite frankly. Okay, because they are all about overriding somebody's intuition. They're overriding boundaries. In order to do that, you have to override intuition. They have an agenda, meaning they have a target. I mean, they're heading somewhere. If someone starts to catch on to that, they have to throw them off track. So they will use time-tested methods of doing that. Even in a simple yet profound way. Unfortunately, a lot of women have experienced this scenario. She has a man in her life, husband, significant other, partner. She wakes up and he's not in bed. So she wonders, where is he? So she was wandering and sees this dim light coming from a certain room. She peeks her head in and she sees him on the computer. And what is he looking at? He's looking at porn. Unfortunately, the vast majority of guys. And so let's say he's not aware, she's been quiet, and all of a sudden she does the, what are you looking at? Okay. Now, and the guys in my sex offender group, I enact this and they confirm it. Okay. What'll happen is this. She's come behind him. She clears her throat. He turns around. He doesn't have time to clear what's on the screen. And so now he's trying to multitask, trying to get rid of it. Why he says, what? Okay. She says, what are you doing? What do you mean, what am I doing? Okay, we have deflection right there. We have denial, and he's eventually going to get into justification, rationalization. Then he's going to project, right? Well, what are you talking about? What's on the screen? Nothing. And he's trying to click out of it. He says, what are you doing? Why'd you sneak up on me like that? Why aren't you asleep? I'm just minding my own business. And I just need a little time to myself, and I couldn't sleep. And you come walking. You notice what he's doing. The only thing he's not doing is acknowledging that she saw him and he's busted. So he's not confirming and affirming reality and her intuition. He's starting to say this. This is what every manipulator, sociopath, psychopath, perpetrator, predator, and cult leader will do. They'll use this phrase literally or figuratively. They're going to say this. Well, I know what it looks like, but it's really not that. And what I say to guys is this: it probably is what it looks like. Now, there are exceptions, but if I have to spend a lot of time telling you, well, I know what it looks like, but it's really not that, the question is, why do I have to do that? Because there's probably a lot of stuff that's where there's smoke, there's fire. And at some point in time, we need to shift it to where the burden of proof is on the guy, is on the perpetrator. So they will always distract. So just like the guy gets up, he's covering the screen, he's looking at her while he's trying to, that's what every perpetrator is going to do. And they're apologists. And really a perpetrator apologist in one way or another has a vested interest in also taking the spotlight off the guy. So they're going to benefit in some fashion one way or another. Online, I think a lot of these perpetrator apologists are perpetrators themselves. The primary thing that a perpetrator has to do is make sure that he can continue to hunt while he throws people off track. So the very first thing he's going to do is flip the script, as the inmates say. They're going to flip it on you. And you have to, if you're a parent or a reasonable person, you stay on message, which is this. It's all about the protection of women and children. And in this day and age, with how many guys are accessing porn, it is not safe to have guys that give evidence of accessing pornography. How do we know they're accessing pornography? Because with Drag Queen Story Hour, no man thinks it's a reasonable proposition to put on women's underwear if he's not accessed porn. Doesn't happen. So if you have a guy that dresses in women's underwear and drag, he's been accessing porn. Is it safe to have a guy who accesses porn, gives evidence, and you look at what these guys do on their off hours, which are really their on hours, they're at clubs stripping. These men are saturated in porn. Why do they want access to kids? We're going to put the burden of proof back on them. What I say to every single person is, no, I'm not phobic. You are lax in child safety. You are lax in protecting women and children. Don't talk to me about phobic, because I've never once talked about what adults are going to do with themselves. I'm not fearful of anything. As a matter of fact, I've gone where you've never gone. I've worked with the worst of the worst. I'm not afraid of anything. You're veritas phobic. You are afraid of the truth. And the reality is this: keep your hands off of kids, get away from kids. You leave kids alone. Kids do not need a deviant man playing dress up. If any man plays dress up, he's at best developmentally stuck. You want to go read in drag, you go read to older folks that are by themselves, that are in retirement communities that need people. How about over the holidays? No, they want access to kids, and we all know why. They're getting into schools. We know why, because they're grooming kids. These are gender confused kids. Why? Because no child, no young person will ever be confused about their gender unless they become confused by somebody older, and typically, inevitably, is by porn. As a matter of fact, you remove the influence of porn and those that have used it to influence and script the minds of kids, and the trans movement will fade away. It did not exist prior to the year 2005. It is inextricably tied to pornography. You have groomed these kids to where now they are confused about their own gender. It used to be that psychology was all about helping self-esteem. How do you do that? You help a child find out what they're good at. You build their competencies. You help them find out why they were born. What is their purpose in life? That's gone. Now, how do we help kids? Oh, we're going to make them eradicate themselves. We're going to have a dead name. We're going to bury their old self. Really? No, what you're doing is you're taking an abuse victim, all things being equal, and little by little, you're making it much more difficult for them to ever go through the healing stages, because now you're going to exploit them, and you're going to continue to affirm a delusion. One of the criteria for a delusional disorder is if you believe something that is not true. So if somebody tells you, I'm not a boy, or I'm not a guy, I'm a girl. That is delusional thinking. We don't help anybody to affirm a delusion. We help them by understanding where that thinking came from so they can begin to find out, did somebody cross their boundaries? Who filled their mind with this stuff? So they also can finally put this stuff away and begin to focus on what's going to help them be a complete person, not become dependent upon pharmaceuticals, having been preyed upon by financial, medical, and sexual predators. That is not how you help someone. You help them accept themselves, not tell them they need to eradicate themselves.
Jon, let's flip the script here for a second. Why, from what I've seen, is it that the vast majority of the time the people bringing children to the drag shows are women? Because the kids don't walk there themselves. They don't find out about themselves. Someone has brought them there. Someone has chaperoned them there. Why does it appear the majority of the time it's mothers, women? Sometimes you'll see men there, but quite often it appears that the audiences, the vast majority, are women. Why would they bring their child to a drag queen storytime hour? Or in some cases, we've seen them bring them to bars where they're like that one video, they brought their children to the bar and in the background it says it's not going to lick itself. Like why if I'm not a parent, I'll admit that, but if I was a parent and I walked into a place where the school or library or whatever said there's going to be this fun event, and I walked in and I realized it was a bar and there was a sign that said it's not going to lick itself, I'm walking out the door, I'm going to phone up the place and I'm going to lodge a complaint, and I'm never going to trust that organization ever again. I'm never going to go there. I'm going to tell all my friends, don't ever go there. Don't bring your children there. Stay away from these people. What has failed here?
There you go. First, I'll segue with this. My greatest concern for those that are still the naysayers that are trying to distract, saying, why aren't you concerned about churches? My greatest concern are churches, 100%. Long before or prior to ever hearing about the trans movement, I had created churchprotect.org. Why? Because I had learned from the incarcerated pedophiles that the most sophisticated were involved in churches. They were perping on churches, or kids in churches. They were pastors so-and-so. They were elders. They're the most vile. So what I want people to understand is my greatest concern is churches. That's why there is churchprotect.org, and I can come out and do a training in your church, by the way. It's really a collection of churches, okay? Because perps will go from one church to the next. So if you hold a training, I require multiple denominations, multiple churches in the area, the leaders get together so they can protect the flock.
It's imperative that a church leader be differentiating, be discerning between different degrees of sex offenders in order to assess the level of risk they pose to a church. And what Church Protect calls the super predator, that is the serial pedophile who specifically targets churches and is a wolf in sheep's clothing.
The most important thing about Church Protect is the fact that they are willing to identify for congregations and for pastors how to identify the predators that may come into their church.
They're in all walks of life. They're doctors, they're police, they're attorneys. The average Joe.
Allowing Church Protect to educate so that you can make an educated decision to at least educate yourself on what are the motives behind predators, what are the tactics that they use.
I just wish all his victims would come forward and tell their story, because there's healing in the story. I still have a lot of issues I have to deal with because I haven't been to church in over 7 years.
Founder of Church Protect, who's a therapist who has worked extensively with survivors of child sexual abuse and worked extensively with child predators in prison, thousands of them.
We started out working with survivors. We ended up in prison. I have about 11 years in prison. Really, it was about 7. She's been doing therapy for a total of about 30 years. I've been doing therapy for about 25.
You have to use your eyes. You have to watch what they're doing. You know, behavior is an important key of what to look for.
So how can a pastor reach out? How can a pastor help survivors? They need to educate themselves. They need to, in a very practical way, put together the right type of systematic help so that finally the survivors can disclose. And we can help with that.
We need to create the proper tools to help churches walk through that process of grieving with survivors, of protecting survivors from predators, and of keeping predators at bay.
Okay, so my greatest concern is churches. The question for those who want to deflect is, why aren't you as concerned as those of us in churches are about perps? Meaning, for the average churchgoer, if you tell them, I think there's a pedophile, what you'll see the majority of churchgoers is this: where? Like, we want to protect our kids. We were naive. They'll say, John, there's what? Tell me more. Now, a lot of churches, quite frankly, a lot of the leadership are afraid to go there, because also there's a direct parallel. Once you start training a church how to understand predators, you'll also open up the can of worms on domestic violence. And so that's another passion of mine. And on Journey to Healing, the program I have from 8 to 9 p.m. Friday nights on TECN.TV tonight, we talk about pigs. We have to be able to spot pigs, because a pig and a dog and a fool and a reprobate mind is the same thing as a psychopath, is a manipulator, is a sociopath, and a cult leader. These are all the same. We're talking about people that have given themselves permission to be selfish. Selfishness grows. Now you layer that with sexuality, and eventually you're going to get, as far as a male, you're going to get a deviant male that's going to go on the hunt. So churches are my greatest concern, and then schools. The drag queen story hour and the furry, those are late in the game, but those are the most creative options. Now, to your question, Russell, I think for these parents, and look at Jazz Jennings' mother, and I'm going to be doing another podcast on, you're dealing primarily with what you got one of two issues: either these woke parents who are more concerned with popularity than parenting, or they have personality disorder. And you can have what used to be called Munchausen syndrome by proxy, that it used to be for physical reasons. I'm deriving a lot of benefit, a lot of accolades, a lot of attention by my child being sick. In this case, my child is now born in the wrong body. What I want to say to those parents, first of all, the majority of them, again, you have kind of a population within a population within a population. You can have women that are predators, right? Think about Ghislaine Maxwell. She worked with Epstein. Allison Mack worked with Raniere in NXIVM. You can have, in the most extreme situations, foster parents that are predators. And so they will get these kids, and they will then start to take them and allow others to have access to them. They will network naive, they will work naive parents. So the question is, who's invited these other mothers to these shows? A lot of predators, and again, predators know us better than we know them. We don't want to believe that there are predators right now in your church and my church. I can tell you there are. I can tell you they are involved in either the nursery or the youth work, or in some way or another, they're having access. They're working it. They're involved in the Christian schools. I'm working with a client who was severely, systematically sexually abused between the ages of 3 and 5, and then even older. But one of the perps, I'm convinced, there were two sisters. One of the perps worked at the church nursery, and there was a preschool or a daycare. They work amongst themselves as far as networks. So you don't know if one of these women that are sending out notice saying, hey, gosh, they use all these demonic names or these perverted names, by the way. Pentecost. Okay, there's one in Canada, in Vancouver. So Miss Pentecost, okay, talk about blasphemous. Where's the sensitivity? Okay, that's a play on Pentecost. Okay, but you're always going to find either blasphemous little terms that are tweaking Christianity or very deviant, either sexually deviant or satanic names. They play on these names. Again, perps love to put it out there because that's half the fun. What they're also doing is this, by the way, Drag Queen Story Hour and other groups like this, you notice they're being invited into schools, but parents don't understand they're testing the resolve and the discernment, level of discernment of a community. They're coming in, and if they get a lot of resistance, they'll move on. If they don't get a lot of resistance, now they know the hunting's good and the pickings are great. And it's like shooting fish in a barrel. They know how to manipulate. Russell, think about what this perp did to get into the life of your family. He wasn't dressed in drag, but the more outlandish these guys can be, then they know these parents really are brain dead. Because if they're willing to accept a deviant guy wearing drag, then once he takes his outfit off and you don't know what he looks like, now he can be the teacher. He can be the substitute teacher. He knows you just drank the Kool-Aid. So therefore, you're going to deny and ignore, as the parent, whatever is in front of your face. So he's not grooming your child. He just really cares about your child and really wants to spend extra time to make sure that your child feels supportive. And we're going to invite them to the after school or the club, the safe space, because we want to make sure there's no bullying. We want to make sure your child is affirmed. And meanwhile, you're a putz and you're a fool and your child is being groomed.
Well, in talking about affirmation, we had talked just briefly about this before we went on air, but there's been this really worrying thing that I've seen on libs of TikTok. Matt Walsh just posted a bit about it, a couple of other people, James Lindsay and that. And what I've really seen is these videos where the teacher comes out as gay, queer, whatever, and all the students, you know, they're all standing there applauding and all that. You're so amazing, Miss So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so. I've seen one that was as bad where they were in a gymnasium and the whole school was cheering on, you know, this teacher. And I thought to myself, when did it become the responsibility of children to affirm adults? When did that become a thing? Why, as an adult, do you need the affirmation from children to feel good about yourself? Don't you have friends? Don't you have family? Don't you have a support system that's age appropriate? And one of the main reasons why I say this is you look at the famous picture of the dock workers in Germany, Robert Landmesser, and all the dock workers are giving the Nazi salute except Robert Landmesser. He's standing there with his arms crossed. And of course, because of that, he was taken away by the police and bad things happened to him. These children are being told that they have to affirm this teacher. They're not given an option in it. There might be a student there that may say, well, I may not necessarily agree with this, or I don't understand this, or whatever, but they are going to go along with the crowd because there's a fear of ostracized. I failed on that one. I'm going to have to edit that out. Ostracization. That really worries me, is because it's this almost enforced groupthink of, you will affirm this teacher. You're not to question this authority figure. And how do we end up in situations where children do end up being groomed and exploited is when they have to put faith and trust in an authority figure that they may not even necessarily agree with.
That's right. And the primary concern, and again, my recommendation for parents or good people that want to combat this kind of stuff, and again, let me give a plug for the group that now I'm a part of, or it was established and they invited me, so I'm the lead clinical member, is the SOGI International Task Force. So that is a tremendous resource. It's a repository of a lot of important information especially how to, for parents, it arms parents with the knowledge and the practical application of how to push back, how to take back your school, how to protect your child from the sexual grooming, from the SOGI sex ed stuff. So the website is SOGI123taskforce.com. Okay, so that's a great resource for parents. What I would say is this, again, when you have these teachers, first of all, I would say this for those teachers, right out of the gate, those teachers that are going on TikTok and talking about how they affirmed their or they're coming out to their kids. Okay, we have a number of concerns here. At the very least, we have really emotionally immature adults that are teaching kids. I would say narcissistic. The last time I checked, you're supposed to leave your personal stuff at the door. They're bringing it in the classroom and they're teaching kids. I don't care, straight or gay. Why are you bringing up sexuality to kids? You know kids are easily influenced, so you are indoctrinating them. If you don't like that term, then stop. So number one, I'll take the most simplistic adults. I'm worried about the developmental level, the character level of any of these teachers that look so frail, so personality disordered, and really that's what we're talking about. So I have a personality disordered teacher that can't figure out to keep their own stuff out of the classroom. We have a problem. That adult should not be teaching kids. If you cannot keep your own crap out of the classroom, do not talk about your sex and sexuality to kids. It's never been appropriate. If you can't help yourself, then don't teach. Last time I checked, it's for reading, writing, and arithmetic and social skills, not to talk about sex and sexuality. If you do, now here's my greatest concern. So on the one hand, the most mild thing I would say is you're giving evidence of being developmentally stuck and you have a personality disorder. That's the most mild thing I could say about you. You need psychological help, and you shouldn't be teaching because you're bringing your own personal stuff to work and influencing these kids, talking about topics that shouldn't be discussed. At worst, you're a perp. You're working with another group, and you're putting this stuff out there, and it's not up to me to say, to prove that you're not. If you don't want to be accused of being a perp, then shut your mouth about your sex and sexuality, because perps will work in groups. And right now, I think there's one teacher a day, at least in Canada, that is unmasked. If you go on Yahoo, I've never seen it like this before. You go on Yahoo, bring up the homepage, and every single day now, a teacher is busted for a sex offense against kids. Every single time. I've never seen, now it's usually 2 stories. So just go on Yahoo, bring up the homepage and scroll. Within the first 6 stories, you're going to see teacher was busted. So we have an epidemic, and it's not an epidemic. It's always been there. I think now they're either so brazen or somehow it's coming out more. Okay, but then again, more adults are becoming more deviant. So we have a massive problem in schools of predators being in school. How do predators groom? They will introduce sexual topics. Every teacher is a mandated reporter. Every teacher knows that one of the red flags is an adult talking about sexual things with a kid. So my challenge to those teachers that are talking about sex and sexuality, what makes you any different than what you just learned about in the mandated reporting course? Why are you fitting the profile of somebody I'm going to have to report? Don't act like one. Keep the issue of sex and sexuality out, because if you do, then you fit the profile of a groomer. So don't do it. Shut your mouth, teach the curriculum, and then we won't have to talk about this issue, will we?
Now, grooming, the term itself, I would say that James Lindsay really brought that to the forefront. He was on Twitter. He started mentioning that term, and it really seemed to resonate with the conservatives and really seemed to upset the progressives. So it kind of took off as this term. Grooming itself as a term has been around for quite a while, but it really took off online, and now it's become part of the culture war, nomoculture overall. Looking at this from 30,000 feet, let's say, let's take a very, very high end look at this. Why is it that all this stuff that we're talking about is all protected in the more progressive sphere overall? I know several liberals. I have friends that are liberals, friends that are, I would say even further left than liberal, not full communists. I'm not really friends with any communists and that, but they're saying that there's something wrong with this, but yet our media is promoting this. Our institutions are promoting this. Everything that I'm seeing is promote, promote, promote. Where is this coming from? Looking at it from 30,000 feet, why is there such a big promotion of this under the progressive sphere? Where did this come from? I mean, we can go back to Alfred Kinsey and kind of the French pervert philosophers and that. I think they did play a role in all this, but it can't just be a bunch of perverted French philosophers. There has to be a bigger picture to this. It can't simply just be a Faustian bargain between the communists and the pedophiles, as James Lindsay often says it is. I think it's got to be even bigger than that. Aldous Huxley in Brave New World said that in that book, children were introduced to sexuality extremely young to destigmatize it, and that. So where is this coming from? If we're going to take a 30,000 foot approach to it.
Yeah. I would recommend people go onto my YouTube channel, scroll down far enough, and you'll see the video, Understanding the Trans Movement, because I have a chart near the end. And I highlight what I believe are each of these special interests. Do they all talk, as far as these special interests, do they all communicate? Probably not. But they're all benefiting off of, as I say, the carcasses. These are the jackals that are feeding off of these kids. These special interests have a vested interest in having access to the bodies and the minds of young people. And we understand that. Marketers and advertisement, they've always, Fifth Avenue marketing, they've always, right? There's always a push. If you can get a kid into something, the parents are going to go along with that, whether it's the latest fad or craze. So it's always been powerful to market to kids. As a matter of fact, there's been a push to limit commercials to kids because kids are so easily influenced, and they pepper they break down the resistance of their parents. Before you know it, parents are buying things for the kids. So kids can be very persuasive. Anyways. Perpetrators know that if you can access a child and influence their sex and sexuality, you have them for life. Why? Because we are sexual beings, not the way Kinsey, and Kinsey was a huge influence. Why? Because, as a matter of fact, he was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. Rockefeller Foundation is admitted as such, and also the CIA. Alfred Kinsey was a pedophile and a sexual sadist. He was a deviant. He was used to create false research that was done by pedophiles perping on kids. Judith Riesman and I became really good friends. She asked me to write a book just shortly before her death. As a matter of fact, I was in this office when I was dissuading her from getting her second booster. That's a different topic. She died just shortly after receiving that second booster. So Judith, that was one of the greatest thrills of my academic and professional career, to become good friends with Judith Riesman. Dr. Riesman unmasked Alfred Kinsey in Kinsey Crimes and Consequences and a number of other books. So Kinsey was used to change the sexual mores of the U.S. and therefore the world. Hugh Hefner said that he would become Kinsey's pamphleteer. So pornography got its launch from or influenced by Alfred Kinsey. Ever since pornography, the world has never been the same. And then the internet. So you have an increasing sexualization. You look at Pornhub, you look at how many hits per day. I forget, like 135 million. I can't even keep track of how many, not that I, right? But you look at the stats. What it means is the vast majority of men are accessing porn every single day. Porn is not static. It will progressively lead a man into more and more hardcore and more degrading, more and more deviant kind of stuff. There's a progression. So you have an active coarsening of society. Men are becoming, more and more men are becoming sexually psychopathic. That means, and again, a psychopath is simply three things. I should finally mention this. It's no conscience. So he's overridden his conscience. If you override your conscience, two things are going to be true. You won't feel sorry for what you've done, because if you have no conscience, you have no remorse, and you don't care about the impact that you're going to have on another person. There goes empathy. So a psychopath by nature has silenced his conscience, overridden, hardened his conscience, and so he has no empathy or no remorse. Now you layer that, you can have a financial psychopath. When you walk onto a car dealership, you certainly have sociopaths. Sociopaths are really sales. They operate on cost-benefit analysis. But a psychopath has taken it even further, where for him, it's now about game theory, and it's about having the last word, last say, last laugh, and the impact. A sociopath doesn't care about impact. He just wants the benefits. So he'll move on if the cost outweighs the benefit. A psychopath won't. A psychopath will go to war over making sure you can't leave or you can't reestablish boundaries. So by nature, very different. But it all starts with narcissism, by the way, because you have to feel pretty good about yourself. And we think a narcissist has low self-esteem. He doesn't. A simple narcissist needs a mirror. A sophisticated narcissist has staying power, right? You have to feel pretty good about yourself to believe you have the right to cross somebody else's boundaries. And that's the beginning of the snowball-like effect. You layer finances on top of a sociopath or psychopath. Now you have a financial psychopath. Bernie Madoff is the classic, according to Robert Hare, the classic white-collar psychopath. He was head of NASDAQ, made off with everybody's money. So that's a financial psychopath. Look at just what's happening to FTX or whatever with Bitcoin. These are financial psychopaths. They've never shed any blood, but they've taken how many billions, they've ruined people's retirements. So layer sexuality on top of a psychopath. Now you have somebody that is hunting to derive benefit at the expense of their intended target. And a psychopath, a sexual psychopath, eventually will target kids, as far as a pedophile will. So you have special interests that are that know the power of influencing sex and sexuality. So I believe you have influences like George Soros, and on a very large scale, they know that if you impact the kid's sex and sexuality, they now vibrate with all sorts of energy. I'm using this loosely, but you kind of wind them up and point them in a direction and burn Seattle down, burn Portland down, burn so along with BLM, we started to see trans lives matter. And the largest riots were in cities that happened to have significant transgender medical clinics because they affect the brain. These hormones do. So you can change society. If you blur the lines of sex, meaning male, female, then you are going to confuse that generation. Therefore, you affect marriage and family. You end up doing away with marriage and family, your society will collapse. And that is how every dictatorship, every communism, whatever you want to call, top down, they have to do away with the nuclear family, meaning who owns the kids? So you either have private property and parental rights or you don't. It really comes down to that. So those that are interested in changing society, and then you have these other special interests. Those that are interested in society, they don't care if kids dress up as cats or furries or drag queens. They don't care. They're interested in shifting society. You have big pharma. Once you get these kids on these hormones, and especially if they've gone through sex change operations, they have to stay on pharmaceuticals for life. Lupron, was given to sex offenders to sterilize them. Okay. You have surgeons that are making a killing. They're buying personal yachts and whatnot. It's a free-for-all. We don't want to believe that surgeons could be financial psychopaths that would actually remove organs for profits. Hospitals, doctors, so the medical end of things. Then you have merchandising. Then you have social media. Then you have media. And then my concern is you have the pedophiles, you have the predators, Pornhub, so big porn. Also, there's a push within the trans movement to legalize prostitution. Some of these trans pushers will say, and these doctors, they're so heinous because there's a waiting list on GoFundMe of 45,000 kids or something like that waiting for double mastectomies that can't afford it. They'll tell these kids, well, go do prostitution for a while. Okay, so they have OnlyFans. And okay, think about what we're telling you. So there's a push to legalize prostitution. Why? Because there's big money in it. And once a kid gets in there, the likelihood they're going to get hooked on drugs, they're going to be owned by a pimp. So there's a lot of financial incentive for those that are going to use these kids, because once a kid gets into porn, now somebody older or more sophisticated is waiting for them. So again, you have special interests. My greatest concern are the predators and those that are going to push pedophilia. And what you have now, this topic, this term that was also really sped up by the COVID issue, is bodily autonomy, meaning a child can make decisions, independent decisions when it comes to his or her own body. That's all a perpetrator needs. You look at California and you see what's happening. They're going to do an end run on parental rights and an end run on age of consent. Now in California, you can have a 15-year-old with a 24-year-old. So age 15 is in what grade? Possibly still 8th grade or middle school, maybe junior high. Junior high or maybe freshman in high school. With a 24-year-old, that's a college student. That's a man. The guy that's pushing it, Senator from California, Senator Weiner, interesting, out of the Bay Area. Guess what population benefits from being able to have access to teens without fear of being put on the sex offender registry once they are busted for working these kids? So the idea of grooming simply is this: little by little, I'm working you toward a desired end. That's all grooming is. So if I'm a car salesman, when you come on my lot, I'm grooming you. If you are in church and I'm a financial perp, I'm grooming you. I'm gonna have reasons why you're gonna stand up to dig deep to take out your wallet. Okay, so whatever it is, whatever I want, I'm gonna work you, and that's all grooming is. It's working another person, little by little.
Now in Canada, we have this new emerging term because of the medical assistance in dying program, which is another topic, but there's a proposal being suggested by the Quebec College of Physicians that an amendment be made to the MAID program to allow teenagers 14 to 17 to kill themselves using a doctor. I refuse to call it a medical procedure because that's just, as George Carlin would say, was language softening. It is simply getting a doctor to kill you. And
it's euthanasia.
It's euthanasia. It is. And again, I'm not opposed to MAID. If you're an adult and you want to die with dignity because you have a horrible illness that you're not going to recover from, it's going to progress worse over time. That's your decision. That's your decision. But my big problem I have with the program is that they're making an amendment 14 to 17 years old with parents' permission. So imagine like, oh, where's your son? Oh, he's not here. Doctor killed him. Don't worry. We supported it.